on the Hudson River estuary, miles away from traditional rural agriculture, and in the heart of our city, lies the Science Barge.
The Science Barge is a sustainable urban farm. We believe that growing food in the city can reduce pollution from conventional agriculture and transportation, and at the same time increase the spread of sustainable technologies like solar power and rainwater catchment. The Science Barge is carbon neutral and emits no waste stream.
This is the average American tomato. It takes up 0.7 square feet of space to produce. It uses 8 gallons of water, half an ounce of diesel fuel. It uses 300 milligrams of pesticides and produces 3/4 of a pound of CO2 emissions. A tomato from a plant like this produced at the Science Barge uses 0.1 square feet of space, 2 gallons of recycled water, half an ounce of biodiesel fuel, uses absolutely no pesticides, and produces 0 CO2 emissions.
Worldwide modern field agriculture uses 2/3 of all freshwater resources, but the recirculating hydroponics technique used on the barge is the most water-efficient method of farming. It eliminates runoff of excess nutrients and fertilizers, which are major causes of water pollution. Engineers of the future will need to use the Earth's resources more efficiently and produce less waste, while at the same time satisfying an ever-increasing demand for goods and services. They need a strong knowledge of their design's impact on built and natural systems, and must be adept at working closely with planners, decision-makers, and the general public. The Science Barge hopes to stimulate the sustainable development of New York and be a model for cities in the years to come.
We've all heard of community gardens, but in a city like New York, there's so little space for serious farmers that a sustainable urban food system seems next to impossible. The Science Barge, now located on the Hudson River near Midtown Manhattan, is taking urban farming seriously. This barge is a demonstration station, showing the public that taking hydroponics to the rooftop is a viable way to become a sustainable city.
Roughly speaking, there's something like 5,000 hectares of unshaded, flat rooftop space in New York City. If we were to grow vegetables using the technology that we're demonstrating here on all 5,000 of those hectares, we could grow enough vegetables to feed something like 15 million people. The unique thing about the Science Barge is that we're powering our greenhouse with renewable energy. We have our 2 large solar arrays. They produce something like 70 or 80% of our power. We do also have the wind turbines, and then our third source of power is our diesel generator. We run our diesel generator off waste vegetable oil or biodiesel. If you imagine in a city like New York with a huge catering industry, it's really, really good to be able to use waste vegetable oil.
The secret to this ultra-modern urban farming is the technology that runs the greenhouse and nourishes the plants. Jennifer Nelkin, the greenhouse director and a hydroponics expert, told us how this high-tech system grows food without wasting any resources.
This weather station has wind speed, wind direction, temperature, solar radiation, precipitation, and so that feeds into our climate controller, which then makes decisions about what to do with the equipment. The computer knows whether to turn on an exhaust fan or to open a roof vent. It knows that if it's raining, to close the roof vents. We can conserve a lot of energy and really manage the climate the way it should be for the plants and for what the plants want, not what it just feels like when you walk in for human comfort. We are using a lot of different kinds of hydroponic systems here. This system right here produces about 75 heads of lettuce a week. That one's more lettuce. This one's all different greens. We have bok choy and Swiss chard and some broccoli rabe. This is called NFT, which stands for Nutrient Film Technique. where you just have a thin film of water that's traveling along the bottom of these trays. And because we capture the water and reuse it, we use a fraction of the fertilizers and about 5 to 10 times less water than conventional field agriculture. Also, we use less space and produce about 5 to 10 times more per square foot also with these kind of techniques. This is our test bed right now for aquaponics, which is aquaculture, the production of fish, with hydroponics that we've seen in all these systems. When you put them together, you can have an organic fertilizer that you can produce crops off of, because ideally we'd like to be using fish waste to feed our leaf and herb crops. So in here we are growing tilapia. You can see some of these fish right here. These fish then produce waste that then feed these plants, but based on what we learn here, we'll increase the number of fish and then eventually connect this fish tank to one of our larger NFT systems so that they can be one closed cycle. Any material that we have left over from the plants, that we compost all that and then harvest the worms out of that, feed the worms to the fish. We have other kind of hydroponic systems, one of which is a Dutch bucket system, and we can see the tomatoes growing in that. So what we have is a reservoir like all of ours. They're all recirculating hydroponic systems. We capture all the water, it drains back into here, and we reuse it. We're on our third cucumber crop here, and you can see these are just starting to set their first fruits. Now, the high productivity we see and our plants being so healthy are because of how we can manage the nutrition, and that's the real advantage of using hydroponics, is being able to control exactly how much nitrogen and calcium and magnesium, how much you have of all these elements that a plant needs to grow. Why we are so productive per square foot is the use of vertical space. A lot of times you see vine crops like this sprawling all over the ground. So these plants, you can see, have been growing for about 5 months now, and they just keep wrapping around this system. This is actually 24 basil plants right here. But these shorter crops that we can't use our high wire production techniques with, like we saw with the tomatoes and cucumbers, we still want to be able to use more vertical space. So this is a demonstration of how you can grow short crops vertically. Collectively, what we're doing is controlled environment agriculture. That's why these systems are so highly productive.
As more people move into the cities, as we are increasingly concerned at reducing CO2 emissions, it is simply unsustainable to consume food that is produced thousands of miles away.
To find out more about urban farming, go to riverwire.com.
Now, one of my dreams has been to grow hydroponic vegetables in an organic fashion. And my research led me down an absolutely fascinating trail. And the result was a destination that's got a name, and the name is aquaponics. And what that means is the cultivation of edible fish as well as hydroponic vegetables and fruits. And this is what the system looks like. This vegetable garden starts in a fish farm. One of the major problems with fish farms is the excrement that fouls the water and eventually affects the growth of the fish. The water from this fish-growing pond is fed through a series of grow beds containing fast-growing leafy vegetables, which just love the fresh manure delivered direct to their roots, courtesy of the fish. These plants take up the nutrients for their growth. The plants in the grow beds strip the nutrients from the water. They also add oxygen back in, and that creates the perfect environment in which the fish can grow. Absolutely brilliant. You can produce enough food to keep your family in fresh produce from a tiny area. I think this is a revolutionary method of growing food that'll capture the imagination of organic gardeners and fisher folk across the country.
Now, one of the hottest trends sweeping the world today is something called the 100-mile food source. Now, it's all about getting your food from within a 100-mile radius of where you live. Now, this ensures you end up with the freshest, most nutritious, tastiest food possible. And I reckon this system here is the ultimate. As it turns out, this is one of the most water-efficient ways of growing vegetables that you can have. You see, the only water loss you have in the circulation between the beds is through evaporation. And because the beds are raised, you have very few problems with pests. In fact, this is ideal for people who are disabled or elderly because it's very easy to dig and plant. Effectively, what we're looking at with this type of system is an organic way of food production that requires no artificial fertilisers or pesticides.